Welcome back and thanks for staying with Newsnight. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, as you would have seen and heard earlier, wants a united front ahead of this year's national elections. But is that even possible? Well, the party convened its nationalist conference this past weekend, but the troubled Northwest region was absent as it grapples with infighting. Ramaphosa is set to meet his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who is casting doubt on the notion of unity. To discuss this further, we're joined by political analyst Theo Venter. Theo, good evening. Thanks very much for talking to us today. A rather peculiar situation, one must say, where a sitting ANC president feels he has to meet his predecessor to iron things out. What's going on from where you're sitting?
Yeah, absolutely. And in your introduction, you also mentioned Northwest, where one can clearly see the fault lines in the ANC. Factions talking about each other as factions. I mean, they belong to the same political party. And that is the same kind of problem we're having with Ramaphosa talking to Zuma. Normally, that discussion would take place from time to time, where a statesman or party leader would talk to elder party leaders or old party leaders. But in this round, I think there's a far more urgent need for discussion, because I think the pushback from the Zuma side in the ANC is threatening the unity. And I mean, this is a very, very historic week for the ANC. Exactly a year ago, when Cyril Ramaphosa gave his first January 8th statement, it was clear that the distance between what he said a year ago and what we knew Zuma is saying in the SONA just wasn't going to happen. And we now know 2-3 weeks later everything changed. And I think ever since then, the need for this discussion that they're now having has been coming.
But what would a Cyril Ramaphosa want a Jacob Zuma to do?
Well, I think what he would do is to just share with him the deep-seated ANC traditions. And that tradition is that an outgoing leader, whether at national level or party level, usually takes a back seat. And you're not on Twitter trying to do different policy interpretations. You're not making movies. You're not making songs. You're not attending NEC meetings like Zuma has been doing, neither attending any of the other meetings which he usually attends, sitting in the back of the room, watching everybody. That is not the ANC tradition. And I think the discussion would be about that. Fall into place, do what all previous leaders did, and then the respect that you would need and that you would get from the party would be coming from itself.
Knowing the character Jacob Zuma, what do you think he's going to do or say?
No, he's going to do two things. In public and in discussion, he's a very friendly and a very warm person. He would say yes, absolutely. And then when he goes out, he'll do exactly the opposite. That's the Jacob Zuma we learned over the last 10 years. What he's saying, what he's doing is one thing, and what he eventually implements or acts is a total different thing. And I think the reason is not too far for us to see. He wants a political solution for the difficulties surrounding his presidency, the stuff that's going to come out in Zondo, the court cases. He wants a political solution. He's not looking for a legal solution. Currently, the system points to a legal solution, and I think any legal solution to the Zuma problem is going to be detrimental to Zuma. So he's now, in my view, exploiting the ANC to get that kind of political solution for himself.
See, which then brings me to part of my very first question. If everyone knows that Jacob Zuma is the character you've just described, he's going to say one thing in front of Cyril Ramaphosa and act differently the next minute. What then is the point of even meeting him?
No, I think there's a very important point in that leadership meeting. It points to Ramaphosa being in charge, and it points to the doing the right things, which Ramaphosa definitely is doing. It also points to a different dynamic. Slowly but surely, Jacob Zuma is moving into the background. As you move away from power over time, you'll see that there comes a distance between what you can do and what you think you can do. And I think with Ramaphosa being the president, that distance is increasing every day. So Jacob Zuma is slowly but surely moving into the background, and his whole action is to come forward every time, not to disappear in the distance.
Well, I mean, from the day Cyril Ramaphosa left that Commonwealth Heads of State meeting in the UK in a half to this day, we have seen what has happened in the Northwest, which is where you are, for example. Has his approach, the approach you're saying he's adopting now in the meeting he's going to have, or in the lead up to the meeting he's going to have with Jacob Zuma, has that approach yielded any positive results? If one takes the Northwest province and what is happening there as an example.
Well, I think you have to distinguish two levels. At the government level, with the interministerial task team under the leadership of Dr. Dlamini Zuma, I do think things are changing. And I think with the new Premier, Jock Mogoro, he's trying his level best to get the administration going. So that's continuing. But the depth of the leadership and the depth of people being appointed in administration goes back 10 years. And that's difficult to change overnight. At the party level, that we're really talking about now, they disbanded the PEC and introduced a provincial task team, the so-called PTT, but they kept the RTTs, the regional structures, they kept them in place. And I think that is where the Zuma faction, or the Supra faction in our case, is at their strongest. And this issue that as we speak, I'm not sure that the Northwest has resolved their lists. That tells you how deep the factions are in this province.
Well, we are told that there will be an announcement on the list. They've already voted, apparently, so we're expecting an outcome around 11 o'clock or shortly after midnight. But here is a point. South Africans can love Cyril Ramaphosa as much as they want. At the end of the day, it is his organization, the ANC, that will make him a weak or a strong president. The question now is whether what is happening in the Northwest, which is happening to a greater or smaller extent elsewhere in the country, will actually, what that will do to the ANC's prospects in the May election.
Yeah, well, that is a very important point, and I've seen some journalists posing the question in the print media and on the TV that it's a choice between the ANC on the one side and the country on the other side. If you want to save the ANC from these internal factions, then you will have to leave the country at bay for a time. Or if you want to solve the country's problems, which are very, very serious, economically and otherwise, then you'll have to sort out the ANC problems either quicker or in a more firmer way. And I think that's the difficulty with the Ramaphosa presidency. He's sitting kind of on both of these chairs. And what he's currently doing, I think, is to manage this almost ambivalence within the ANC as best as he can. But I don't think the party, in terms of the Zuma faction, is giving him a lot to sleep well about.
Theo Venter, that's where we're going to leave it for this evening. Thanks very much for your time and for your insights. He is, of course, a political analyst based at the University of the Northwest.